Okay, this is lesson 2.6 on decimals representing millionths. Before continuing to watch the recording, please make sure you have this worksheet in front of you, as you'll be taking notes again as you see in the video. Also, please make sure you have a pencil, a different colored pen, and perhaps a highlighter on hand as well. Now, this place value chart for decimals, I would say part of it may look familiar to you from previous years. So let's just get ourselves looking at the chart first before we practice looking into decimal numbers. So take your pencil and make sure that you put a decimal point in between the ones and the tenths, because a decimal point represents the boundary between whole numbers. So to the left of the decimal, we always have, I'm just changing the thickness here, we always have whole numbers. And then to the right of the decimal, we deal with decimal numbers. And it continues on in both directions. Okay, so again, whole numbers and decimal numbers. Whole numbers to the left of the decimal numbers to the right of the decimal. Now also, we are still going to apply another vocab word that we came across in the previous unit, or in the previous lessons in this unit, and that is, remember that a period refers to a group of 3 numbers. Okay, so we've got a period there. We also have another period there. Now there's no specific name given to these 2 periods. Just know for now you're dealing with 2 periods after the decimal point. Okay, so the tenths, hundredths, and thousandths make up 1 period. The 10,000ths, 100,000ths, and millionths make up another period. Now the periods for decimal numbers are really important when you're naming a decimal. That'll be more clear in a few minutes. Now let's just practice saying a decimal number. Okay, so pause the recording and see if you can say this decimal number to yourself. I'm going to continue. So this decimal number is read as 2 and remember that we use and for the decimal point, 2 and 731 thousandths. Again, I'll repeat that. It's 2 and 731 thousandths. Okay? So make sure that you understand how to name it, and also notice in this decimal number, we're naming it according to the furthest decimal place that the last digit occupies. So in this example, it's 1. Okay? If it was just 2 and 73, we'd say 2 and 73 hundredths. But in this case, it's 2 and 731 thousandths. Now suppose I extended the decimal here. I'm going to add 3 more digits at the end here. So now we've extended it. It's still read in a similar fashion, except you have another period to tag onto. And remember what I said is that you're always looking at the last digit in the last place value it occupies. So you would read this 2 and 731 thousandths, 378 millionths. Again, I'll repeat that. It's read as 2 and 731 thousandths, 378 millionths. Okay, so that's how you read a larger decimal number. So down below, I have a tip here. So to write decimal numbers, arrange the digits in periods of 3. Now, if there are 5 or more digits after the decimal point, separate the periods with spaces. Please don't use commas with decimal numbers. So for example, please avoid writing, and don't write this down. Okay, I know in real life, like for example, when you see it on a calculator, you will see a string of digits written this way with no spaces between the periods. But we want to distinguish between periods. So when you're writing a decimal number that has 5 or more digits, I would even say if you have 4 as well, notice you have 1 period there and then I have a space between the 7 and the 6. Okay? And I'm going to erase that Let's go with 3 more practice decimal numbers. Okay. Now, I'm just going to make sure that we can still see this on the screen. Now, I'm not going to have it perfectly line up, but refer to the chart up above. Let's do 3. Okay, so actually I'm just gonna make these look a little bit closer together. Okay. Sorry. Okay, I'm just gonna rewrite this because I want to make sure that I'm not spacing it out too much. Okay, now try and say this decimal number to yourself. Pause the recording and try and say it to yourself. Now, the way you would say this, and I'm looking at the place value chart to refer to, it's 3 and 174 thousandths, 51 hundred thousandths. Okay, I'll repeat that again. 3 and 174 thousandths, 51 hundred thousandths. This time we don't have a digit in the millionth spot, so the furthest place that the decimal number occupies is the hundred thousandths. So that's why we would say 3 and 174 thousandths, 51 hundred thousandths. Okay, let's try another one here. Let's give you 2 digits here. Okay, again, if you want to pause the recording and try to test yourself and say this digit underneath or this decimal number underneath, please feel free to do so. I'm going to continue. The way you would read this decimal number is 14 and 8 thousandths, 9 millionths. In this case, you still split it up according to periods, and still the same rule applies. You would name the decimal number according to the furthest place that digit occupies in the period. So 8 thousandths, 9 millionths. Here's, let's do 2 more examples. Oops. 2 more examples here. Okay, there's actually 2 ways you can say this decimal number. So try to think of at least one way to yourself how you would say it. So there's 2 ways to say this, and I'm actually going to jot this down beside it here. You can say this decimal as, you could say it as 3 hundred thousandths. Or you could say it as 30 millionths. So think to yourself why you could say it in either of those 2 ways. Again, 300 thousandths or 30 millionths. Okay. Let's do one more here. We can do, let's do okay, so again, I'll just scroll up a little bit here. Well, I can't quite do that, but in any case, pause the recording and see if you can say this. So the way you would say this is 4 and 502 thousandths to 10 thousandths. Notice here I split it up intentionally between the thousandths and the 10 thousandths because that goes into the next period. Okay, make sure too that you're when you're ordering decimal numbers as well, or putting them in order or determining greatest and least, that you're referring to a place value chart if you need to see which decimal number is bigger than the other. And that is the end of our recording.